back to the Shuffle Squad, everyone. Zach Lesage here. I am joined by our 2023 international champion from North America, Cyrus Davis. How's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you?
We're doing pretty good. We're here to talk about everyone's thorn in their side, or maybe their best friend. I don't know, Snorlax. People either love it or hate it. I think it gets unfairly hated on this format, but it is one of those kind of polarizing decks. And recently you just did well with this one at Toronto, right?
Yeah, me and a few friends played the Snorlax list is on the screen here to Toronto. I finished 42nd. I think the highest placing one of us was my friend Dennis Paroff, who he lost his win into top 8 to Pidgeot Control, so obviously can't win that matchup, but the deck did very well for us over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, that's sick. So glad that I have you on our side, and shout out to Shuffle for having some of the best players in the game. We're gonna go over this list pretty much card by card, at least for more of the interesting cards, and kind of explain Snorlax control. And we're gonna go over some gameplay, try to get in a solid game of Snorlax. A lot of people on ladder snap concede. So if you're watching this video, you'll be able to learn about a lot of the detailed card breakdown. You're going to be able to learn about the gameplay, the strategy. The list is going to be available either in the pinned comment or the description. So check both. If you need any of the cards, check out Kayfabe Cards, check out PTCGO Store. We have links available for in real life cards, codes, whatever in our description. And of course, give this video a like, share, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you think about Snorlax, or just let us know anything. I mean, it helps boost the YouTube algorithm. So I'll kick things off here a little bit with Snorlax, and Cyrus and I are going to go back and forth when it comes down to kind of describing some of these cards. Snorlax is really going to be the main function of this deck, and you might see that we only have the one energy here, the enriching energy. Now, the only reason why we have enriching energy is for drawing, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. Other than that, we're not here to attack with anything. We're actually here to go for an alternative win condition, and that's going to be deck out, or your opponent just conceding the game before they deck out. Now, if Snorlax is in the active spot, your opponent can't retreat. And non-retreating doesn't sound too bad until you start using other cards like Counter Catcher, Boss's Orders, bringing up a Pheasantipity that's not going to attack, or a Radiant Greninja that's not going to attack. And that's really the whole forefront of this deck, is just kind of sticking annoying Pokemon that can stop your opponent from attacking while you build up a game plan to kind of deck out your opponent, or put your opponent in a position where they can't win the game. Now, I'll pass it over to you, Cyrus. What are some cards that we can kind of expect maybe when we're doing some gameplay, some cards that are really core to the Snorlax deck, anything of the sorts?
So, first off, so like you were saying, our Snorlax's game plan is to lock Pokemon in our opponent's active spot that they don't want there. And our primary way to do that is going to be with that Accompanying Flute. So, Accompanying Flute allows us to look at the top cards of our opponent's deck, reveal them actually, and put any cards, any Pokemon that we want there onto their bench. So, this is the primary way that we're going to get Pokemon that our opponent doesn't want into play. That way we can trap them with Snorlax. So, think key cards that opponents don't typically attack with, like Lumineon V, Squawkabilly EX, Radiant Greninja, all Pokemon that the opponent doesn't usually play energy to attack with, or that just don't do enough damage to really take any prize cards in general. We're going to use Accompanying Flute to get those Pokemon onto our opponent's bench.
Sweet.
Yeah, from there, our opponent's only way to move those Pokemon are usually their switching cards, so Switch Cart, Switch. And we are going to be getting rid of those with Misfortune Sisters and Eri. So we have our 2 item attacker there. These are our key supporter cards for whittling our opponent's resources away. We're going to get rid of any of their switching cards. That way they no longer have ways to move those Pokemon from the active position, and Snorlax can keep them there indefinitely.
Yeah, that definitely sounds pretty annoying if you're your opponent and they get one of those Pokemon. I was also going to mention another way to maybe grab one of your opponent's Pokemon is going to be from Erika's. You get to look at your opponent's hand, drag a basic Pokemon there from the active. So a lot of the games when you're playing Snorlax is going to be hide the Pokemon, whether it's in your deck and you're hoping your opponent doesn't rip with the flute, or that you maybe discard the card from your hands. In previous builds, there was even Mantine, so you can get it from your opponent's discard pile if they discarded it. The main way we're going to start getting these annoying cards out is going to be a combination of like Arven. Arven allows us to open up a lot of cards in our deck, whether we want to get out a Snorlax with Nest Ball, or we want to grab out one of our annoying Pokemon tools that can maybe help our opponent or make sure that our opponent can't get a knockout, make sure our opponent doesn't have energies. And one of the cards we might search out is going to be Boxed Order. Boxed Order is a pretty new build. I think we saw some of this with Sanders' early builds from a few regionals ago. Maybe you can explain like Boxed Order versus Rotom, where you really think the deck stands, or the cards that you're typically searching out with Boxed Order.
Yeah, so Rotom V has been a staple in Snorlax for a long time, basically as soon as it released, and allowing you to draw 3 cards to end your turn. And that has been the primary way that Snorlax has drawn cards. Rotom has become an increasingly large liability as time has gone on. Obviously, there's always been the problem where Rotom allows your opponent to boss it up, which gives them something in your active pod that isn't Snorlax and allows them to retreat, so it makes it so that their gusting cards are now out to break the lock. And of course, it gives up 2 prize cards, which is a pretty hefty hurt in how many times your opponent actually does need to break the lock. So it both gives them a way to break the lock and means that they need to break the lock less times to win. Now, recently, especially since the release of Dusk Noir has presented a much larger problem to Rotom, where your opponent can sort of knock it out with their Dusk Noir pieces and then Iono you on the same turn. They can also now, with the release of Alolan Exeggutor EX and Surging Sparks, this has been the nail in the coffin for Rotom builds of Snorlax. Okay. You no longer beat Regidrago more than 50% of the time. I'd even say it's like significantly unfavored with the Rotom build of Snorlax, because they can easily just start spamming the Alolan Exeggutor EX attack with their Regidrago and use that to pick off your Rotom really, really easily. You used to be able to protect your Rotom against Regidrago with a card like potentially Hero's Cape to put it above Lost Impact range, or even just Bravery Charms to make it so they can't knock it out with things like Phantom Dive or Rolling Iron. But now they have that Alolan Exeggutor EX, which makes it just really easy to get rid of the Rotom, so we need to find substitutes for it. And that main substitute here is the Boxed Order. Well, there are a couple cards, other cards in here that also help make up for Rotom, like that Enriching Energy, but the Boxed Order has been the first and foremost one that has been seeing play in all non-Rotom builds, just as a different way to let us end our turn by grabbing the cards that we need, usually things like Counter Catcher, Pokégear, Night Stretcher, or Nest Ball.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just an alternative way to get set up, because we saw in the finals of Toronto Regionals, Cal Connor got that huge coin flip with an Alolan Exeggutor. Might have not been a Snorlax matchup, but if you run Rotom, you have to run Mist, you have to run other things, and it just becomes way too messy of a list and way too many liabilities. Now, there's a lot of other cool cards in the list, and I mean, Snorlax can continuously go over by using Cyllene, grabbing back Pal Pad, using cards such as Team Yelchier. Those are cards that we see in pretty much almost every Snorlax list. So I think what we'll do is we'll actually end up going through some gameplay, covering anything. If anyone has any questions when it comes down to Snorlax, this list, anything else, I'll make sure to put both my socials and Cyrus's socials in the description. So if you're trying to get some coaching from either of us, if you're trying to follow us on socials, or if you want to ask any questions in the comment section, 100% feel free to do so. Totally here to answer any of those questions, comments, concerns, anything that you have. We're going to try to play some gameplay when it comes to Snorlax. Again, hopefully that we don't have too many opponents that just want to instant concede by playing Snorlax. But we'll see how the ladder goes. Fingers crossed, and let's jump into it. Okay, we're going to call a coin flip. Do you think it's better to call heads or tails? Which one? Do you have any superstitions about that?
Always heads.
Always heads? See,
I don't necessarily have a superstition. I'm just committed to always saying the same one. That way, if my opponent mishears me, I can say with 100% confidence.
You always say heads. Okay, cool. And with this deck, do we want to be going first or do we want to be going second?
second. And the
Okay.
reason we usually want to go second is because most of our matchups are so favorable for us that our most likely way to lose them is actually just getting donked. So by going second, we avoid donks as often as possible.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. We'll see exactly how it goes. At least starting with Klefki, our deck's a little bit like disguised. Benet Guardy, interesting. Do you think it's better to go like? How do you think this matchup plays out? Have you actually tested against this like?
I have a bit. Actually, probably more from the Benet side, and it looks like we're actually hitting the Dusknoir build, which I haven't seen in a while. And this matchup is fairly close. I would definitely call it Benet favored, but we can definitely win by just getting rid of enough of their Dusknoir pieces. Mimikyu is going to be pretty important going into the mid to late game, and we won.
Yeah. So this is one of the good things about Snorlax is sometimes people make mistakes. You can see our opponent went for a Squawkabilly, probably going all in on whatever gameplay they could have, misreading Mischievous Lock and not being able to use it because while Klefki's in the active spot, all of our opponent's basic Pokemon don't have abilities. It's kind of what I thought we might see a little bit, so we might go through a few games where people can see before we get into the game. But I think it's also really important to have some of that commentary, some of these starts, seeing how kind of advantageous different Snorlax things can be to our point where our opponent gets frustrated and concedes.
Yeah, and something else that is interesting in that position is that our opponent obviously doesn't know that we're playing Snorlax there. They think we're playing something else that has Klefki in it.
Maybe Gardevoir.
They conceded because they made the mistake of playing Squawk under Klefki, but realistically, they actually probably did fold the game just by playing Squawkabilly into a Snorlax deck in general because they gave us an easy Pokemon to trap.
Exactly. I see a lot of players, like I played Snorlax at a few League Cups last season to pretty decent success, and the amount of people that just like hard put down that Lumineon, hard put down that Radiant Greninja, anything that's trappable, you do run into some very free win situations. So maybe it's time that like people like don't always like clown on Snorlax. Maybe they embrace some of those free wins, because I think overall like people just aren't used to playing against this kind of play style, and that's what's more frustrating. Snorlax is pretty easy to counter when you think about the metagame. So you either want to play a deck that beats Snorlax or loses to Snorlax. You just kind of make that line in the sand, and I wouldn't necessarily worry about having a deck that loses Snorlax trying to get it to beat Snorlax or anything else of the sort.
Yeah, and there's always a chance that you manage to beat Snorlax, regardless. So like, just make sure that you don't necessarily tech for it. Just make sure that you know what your routes are and your lines are to potentially win, and actually practice the matchup rather than going into it blind.
Exactly. So we're gonna try to jump into another game here. Hopefully we can play more than 1 minute. But if it doesn't, we'll see. Like, this is just how Snorlax is. So let's jump into one. So we're gonna go with that perfect coin flip heads again. Maybe we could win the coin flip. No, oh, we did win the coin flip. I got a little bit confused there.
Beautiful.
So learning from last game, we want to go second, forcing our opponent to go first. We have more opportunities to not get donked. And this time we actually started with Snorlax. Does it show how many times we mulligans? I don't know if it does. But this looks like a pretty good hand if I ever saw one. Like, we could Arven, search for other things, have a backup. Maybe our opponent instant concedes when they see block lax. Maybe we face an auto loss. You never know.
Yeah, and Snorlax is definitely our best starter. I think people can be tempted with the Klefkis in the deck to open them, but most matchups you still just want to open the Snorlax. Klefki, something nice about Klefki in the deck is that it isn't a bad starter if you have to start it, so it does slow your opponent down, but we still would rather make sure that our opponent has to go through 6 Snorlax to win the game in most matchups.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about this Latias because to me, most of the decks that play Latias are either going to be Cloth or they're going to be Ancient Box or not Ancient Box, Turbo Roaring Moon. Both of those I think can be pretty difficult matchups. Now, with our opponent just going Latias pass, we're basically stopping their Skyliner ability. Do you think we have to be safe and set up another Pokemon on our bench here, right?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely need to get another Snorlax down just to be safe. I actually don't mind seeing the Latias here. I think obviously this is a Roaring Moon. That's not ideal, but with the 2 Klefkis in the deck, we should have a more than fine time against Cloth, and there's also a good chance that this is like Miraidon, which is also another really easy.
That's very true. Miraidon should be pretty free for us. Now we go Nest Ball. What do you think the tool card that we grab here is?
I probably grab the Luxurious Cape, just since the Defiance Vest isn't likely to be useful anytime soon. We probably won't use Luxurious Cape either, but want to thin a tool out of the deck anyways.
Sure.
Usually I would say that our number 1 tool to grab is the Stone. Just that way, if we draw like a Nest Ball and need to go for Pidgeot, we can.
Then we just have it.
We have the Stone in hand, so.
That makes sense. And do you think we just grab another Snorlax here and keep on throwing out Snorlax while we're waiting to see what our opponent's playing?
Yeah, definitely. That's a nice thing about these no Rotom builds, is we can really make sure that our opponent has to go through ahead and knock out 6 Snorlax and doesn't get an opportunity to take easy prize cards or anything else.
Gotcha. And last thing before we end our turn, I don't think we want to play Pokégear. We're not going to put Stone down on a Snorlax. Do you think it's worthwhile to cape one of these, or just really wait up, find some more information from our opponent's deck first?
Yeah, really wait on that cape. Just make sure we know what we're playing against. It can be useful against something like Miraidon early game sometimes, but for the most part, it's not worth risking the 2 prizes.
For sure. So yeah, when in doubt, try to gain information, see what your opponent's playing. I'm not sure what they're playing. It could really be a lot of things, but
anything.
We know that their deck's primarily basic Pokemon. I think that's one thing. They have Pokemon that we could block up in the active spots. So, okay. I think we don't really need to do too much here. I'd actually want to just see information. Like, do you think it's better to go raw Eri or Misfortune Sisters? I think Eri, they probably have a large hands.
Yeah, and if they have, I think, well, definitely Eri for the information. And one thing to note about like when we should and shouldn't use Eri, looks like we're playing against Raging Bolt with a completely dead hand. Maybe they should just use the Penny. One thing is that to know about when to use Eri is if the opponent in this position, if they had a switching card in hand, they wouldn't be able to use it anyways, so they have a higher chance of having a switching card in hand. Whereas if they were in a position where they would have played the switching card if they had it, then we don't want to Eri because we know that they probably don't have a switching card in hand.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the other thing about Snorlax that makes it a very like powerful pick is the more that you know about the metagame and the more that you know about your opponent's deck, standard counts. The fact that Cyrus and I were able to ring off all the decks that might have played Latias allows you to kind of put decks into pools, and that allows you to kind of work forward towards a strategy or maybe a common strategy to work against some cards there. So there's always sneak peeks about what your opponent's deck might be. Starting with Latias EX, even though we had no information, you can make a lot of solid plays there. Unfortunately, our opponent conceded again. I mean, their hand really did suck no matter what we were playing. But I'm
just sad that they didn't go ahead and style with the Penny.
Yeah, that's fair. I think knowing the fact that they would have had the Latias EX, even if they used Penny, we would have eventually got it back down onto our opponent's field, or found enough Pokemon in play that we could have brought up their other Pokemon with Erika's Accompanying Flute. I also think that if our opponent, whether or not they play Slitherwing, because they did have a lot of techs, sometimes a lone Mimikyu is enough to just win in this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with the Slitherwing in the list, like the Raging Bolt has hefty 3 retreat costs. So if you can, obviously they had the Latias there, so that would get around that. But most Raging Bolt lists don't have the Latias. So in that situation, if they play Slitherwing and no Latias, you can just sort of keep bringing up that 3 retreat Raging Bolt and force them to find more ways to retreat into the Slitherwing.
Exactly. So I think we'll try to play one last game on the ladder, whether or not it ends in a couple minutes or not. We'll really see if our opponent, if we can get a good game with Snorlax. I think a lot of games in tournaments are like this too. You either walk into a matchup where you have all the cards you're prepared for, or Snorlax usually can lose pretty quickly. Some games might be a little bit close, but I think a lot of it can be matchup based. Snorlax is really good into our current metagame. So let's roll on to this next one. Let's hope that we can get some more gameplay for y'all. Okay, we're gonna... Heads is working so well for us that our opponents are just instant conceding. We lost the coin flip. Maybe our opponent will just go first. Even if we go first, it's not terrible. Like, we don't instantly lose. Okay, so we got the ideal thing. It's looking up for us.
Yeah, most decks in this format do want to go first because they want to go first against Regidrago, and Regidrago is so dominant in the format, which definitely can be an advantage for us as a deck that wants to go second blind.
Okay, so we're playing against the Dawn.
Yeah, this is definitely one of our tougher matchups. They do play a lot of ways to get out of the active spot. They have ways to deal with Mimikyu, but it's not completely unwinnable. We'll have to see.
Plus, they have that potential for that extra turn. So we'll see. I also think whenever my opponent plays down like 2 Pokemon, I always just feel like pretty good in that matchup. I think it's better to just like draw your card for your turn, gain extra information. Cloth isn't so centralized right now to the point where you have to put down 2 Pokemon. So when in doubt, I think there's maybe a way that we could trap our opponent, or at least fingers crossed they didn't tech everything against us.
Yeah, they've already made the mistake of playing the Greninja, which is something that we can trap. And like you said, yeah, benching more than 1 Pokemon, especially because we know that they weren't even necessarily thinking about the Cloth Dog, since their active has more than 80 HP, so it's like clearly they maybe aren't quite as experienced.
For sure. Now, with our opponent, like, I think they can get... I'd say it's probably safer that we go first with Nest Ball, or do you think it's that we go Enriching Energy first to try to draw some of our other cards? Sure. So let's use Enriching Energy. That's going to allow us to draw 4 cards. And not getting anything else extra, but we are able to kind of start working out some things that maybe maybe we can do. So I guess next step is just Nest Ball, peer through our deck, see exactly what's going on. Doesn't look like we have any Pokemon prized. I don't want to sit here and prize check while everyone's watching, because that sounds like the most boring video ever, but make sure you're doing your full prize checks when it comes down to it. Let's go. We're going to get up Snorlax here. Now, where do you think we go next? Because there's actually like a few options that we have when it comes to this. Yeah, we prize Artisan and Jubilee. Oops. Yeah, that's why we talk about prize checking. So yeah, maybe follow, like, it's kind of funny that we actually had both prized. Hopefully we don't lose the game over that. I mean, at least we're shuffling away a lot of these cards that might have been good in our opponent's hands away, like, that they could have drawn into. Yeah, fingers crossed that it just ends up working out. Yeah, that's a big yikes with the Artisan, especially, like, so make sure, like, even if you don't do a full prize check, maybe it would have been a better idea for us to check our stadiums. Obviously, you only have 1 special energy that's already been attached, but those are really the cards that you can check in your hand, so that you can at least play towards maybe your options with Arven, or play towards anything else like that. Now, on the plus side, we're not really getting burned by it because our opponent's just going Metal Coating, and we can kind of... Yeah. Gotcha. So here, like, we either have Penny, which Penny we can use as plus draw for with Pidgeot, or do you think we go forward with Pokégear, trying to get maybe like an Arven to get set up? Sounds like a plan. So you can see that Enriching Energy, we can always keep on going and going and going and going. Now, I think we're going to go forward with another Snorlax. Do you think we go Nest Ball for a 3rd Snorlax, or do we go for like maybe a Mimikyu that our opponent might have overinvested their energies on Dialga? Gotcha. Now, do you think we leave the Pidgeot in play, or do you think we're putting that back into our deck so that it's not a potential boss target? Sweet, sweet. And the last card that I think I might want to play down is the Luxurious Cave, because I'm looking at this Temporal Rupture, and I don't know if I want to get knocked out. At the same time, getting knocked out might not be so bad, because we could go Counter Catcher onto Radiant Greninja, because I think those are really the 2 lines of play that we have. I'm actually, now more that I'm talking about it, I think I want to get knocked out, so we have access to Counter Catcher. Yeah, 1000%. So glad we talked that out there, because it's always tempting to like put down or not put down. And I mean, looks like we are about to get ruptured. Okay, new hands, new us. Yeah, because we're worried about our opponent maybe going Dialga V-Star and knocking out both of our Pokemon. So Team Yelchier is probably not going to be worthwhile to play. I mean, we could put back in the Snorlax, Penny, and Colress. And does Defiance do anything? They're going to hit for 180. Oh, okay, that's going to show it down. So, okay, let's just go for boxed orders because that's going to end our turn. Let's try to get set up again. We can search for 2 item cards, nothing else. So I think item number 1 is probably going to be Counter Catcher because we can maybe start blocking that Radiant Greninja. And when it comes to other cards, do you think the next one's just going to be like a Nest Ball to grab out another Snorlax? Perfect. Yeah, it's really unfortunate Iono that we got kind of put into where it's just like we don't have a like draw supporter. We're just kind of like feeling things out. We could also go Nest Ball into Forest Seal Stone, Pidgeot, grab whatever we need. So we have some options here. I also think that our opponents like even though that our situation's like not the greatest, the fact that our opponent used Pal Pad not on Professor Turos in this matchup when we could like lock our opponent's Pokemon, and of course they already have a Turo in their discard pile. Like I think they're just playing too quick for this particular matchup, where they could just be playing a little bit slower, making sure that they're like just holding on to more resources. That might have been a little bit better. So, I mean, I'm not really worried about... I mean, Worker can draw us +3 cards. I'm not going to be super upset about that. Do you think it's just best to go block, grab another block with Nest Ball? I mean, I guess we could go Worker first, draw 3 cards, see if we get anything. And we did get another Counter Catcher. Definitely not upset about that. So let's go Counter Catcher, bring this up. This is where we want to go Block Lax. Now, we're still probably getting knocked out no matter what our opponent does with like Luxury Cape, and I don't want to necessarily like get caught up in all that. Okay, that's fair. So we'll put Vest there, and I guess the next thing that we do is going to be Boxed Order. Probably just finding another way to get another Snorlax. We can go Nest Ball. Do you think we go for a Pokégear, maybe trying to grab a a Penny or something like that, or just having a supporter for next turn? And the Nest Ball also opens up for us, like, again, for that Pidgeot EX play, or Pidgeot V play, so we can go Pidgeot, Forest Seal Stone, use it to grab whatever we want. So whether we're probably going to end up having a Snorlax, but we'll see exactly what our opponent does. Fingers crossed that they actually just don't get out of this. They need to get a Professor Turo here to get out of the Radiant Greninja.
It's a lot better for us to use our tools more liberally in this matchup. When we have a tool that's not that important in the matchup, we can just sort of use it when it might be a little bit useful, because we don't want it in the deck anyways. If our opponent uses like Iono, we don't want that card going back to the deck, potentially draw it later instead of something else.
Exactly. I'm also looking at OBS right now. We might have had some audio thing, so if at any point anyone couldn't hear what Cyrus was saying, we're probably just going to leave it because I think it was only just like for a split minute. But otherwise, if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. So now that we have both audio 1000% working, what do you think is the best way to approach this? I know our opponent probably doesn't have a card in their hand that we want to pitch away. I think, do we just go Nest Ball, grab another Snorlax so that we're prepared to thin before Pokégear, and then decide what we want to get off Pokégear?
I think I would actually probably use the Eri here.
Okay.
So one thing when we're playing against these Turo decks is that they are going to be holding onto cards like Ultra Ball and Vessel a lot of the time. Obviously, in this case, they aren't, but it's good to check. That will allow them to discard that Pokemon once they Turo it up. So if we can remove those cards from their hand, then even when they draw the Turo, they won't want to use it until they draw one of those cards. Otherwise, we could just Erika's Invitation the Greninja right back into play after they Turo it.
Sure. So just because our timer is going a little bit low, I decided to go for the Boxed Order Pokégear, giving ourselves just lift this Klefki up if we need to, having more options to play through our ends of our turn. And we know from Eri that they really have nothing. So this is when I think that we can go a little bit more aggressive when it comes down to it.
Yeah, the most important thing here is going to be find that Penny on the Klefki. We know they have a boss in hand, so we want to get that Klefki out of here before they find a way to retreat their Greninja. Which, nice, right off the first Pokégear, able to pick up that Klefki.
And do you think we use Boxed Order here? Do you think we go, like, past our turn? Is there ever a point where you don't use Boxed Order?
Yeah, I think we wouldn't use it here just because we don't really need anything. We sort of have everything that we need in hand already. Maybe like a Night Stretcher could be nice, but I think that, especially knowing that our opponent's hand is pretty dead, we can play it more patiently and sort of stockpile our resources.
So the fact that they're evolving their Dialga, I'm not sure if that's a good sign, a bad sign. Maybe they're just worried about, like... I'm honestly not sure what they're doing here.
Yeah, I guess they just decided for some reason this turn was the turn that they wanted to evolve some of their Pokemon prematurely. Definitely, if you're an Archaludon player and you want to know more about the Snorlax matchup, don't evolve your Duraldons until your opponent brings them up. Because now, if we find a counter catcher and we want to bring up something that can attack after they remove the Greninja from play, we're going to bring up that Duraldon that has no energy on it, right? Whereas
Exactly.
if we save their Archaludons, then they would have more ways to evolve their Duraldons after we counter catcher them.
1000%. And the other thing here too is that now that our opponent they only have the one Dura there, that's Raging Hammer is the only Pokemon or the only attack that can knock out this Mimikyu here.
Yeah, and they also have they have 9 energy committed to the board already, and they usually only play 9, maybe 10.
Yeah.
And they've already used their Scoop Cyclone, so they don't have a way to return those energy to their hand, which means they don't have enough energy to set up the Duraldon to attack and Mimikyu now. So the only way for them to set up Duraldon would be to Turo one of these Pokemon, which they're already down one of their Turos, and then Night Stretcher all of those energy back to set up the Duraldon. So now we have a very realistic win condition with that Mimikyu.
Exactly. The other thing too is our opponent also has that Radiant Greninja in their hand still. So we could also use Erika's against that too, to just bring it back to the active, adding another Pokemon that doesn't really help them on their side of the fields.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely going to want to find another basic Pokemon down. It might just be the Mimikyu if we have to, but we also have that enriching energy to try to find something. But yeah, we'd really like to find maybe another way to get Snorlax off of the enriching energy. That way we can go for the Erika's invitation without much worry.
Okay, so there's Night Stretcher. That guarantees everything, so we can go get back another Snorlax at this point. And the reason why is we just can't let our one Snorlax get out in case our opponent plays Turo. Or some other way to get out of the active that we haven't necessarily thought of. So we're going to go Erika's, and Erika's bring up their Radiant Greninja, because again, I don't think they played anything else after that Iono.
No.
So we know exactly what's in their hands. We also want to check to see what other options there are. So we see that our opponent doesn't have too much else going on here. And we can kind of like see the other cards that they've played. We have a decent understanding of what's going on with their board. And this is really where I think we might be able to hammer our opponent with Misfortune Sisters. We know that they have a Night Stretcher in their hand, so if they don't play it, we can almost Eri that if we decide to. So we'll see exactly how play it turn by turn, because our opponent really needs a, they didn't have a card to get out of this situation yet.
Yeah, Night Stretcher can be very valuable for our opponent later in the game when it comes to setting that baby Duraldon up to have a way to get through Mimikyu. So definitely getting rid of those Night Stretchers at this point can be useful. It looks like they are just going to Night Stretcher that 10th energy back in the hand now, and the concealed cards it back away. So we'll probably just end up going for Misfortune Sisters. I actually can't, with our setup, can't see how many cards does our opponent have in deck here?
They have 9 cards in their deck.
Okay, so yeah, with more Misfortune Sisters hitting more than 50% of their deck, that spell is definitely good news for us. And even gonna go ahead and evolve and do another Pokemon that cannot attack into our Mimikyu here.
At this point, do we just put down Mimikyu because they don't really have too much else here?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably not much harm in it. It looks like they might just be folding the game anyways, researching into the last remaining cards of their deck.
Yeah, this is really like one of those things that I feel like Snorlax players, like, they do some, or players when they play against Snorlax, sometimes they just don't know how to react. I think I want to use Accompanying Flute here, just see what the last 2 cards are.
Yeah, just Just check it out.
Um,
Oh, now they only have one card in deck.
They have Fez and they have Boss. So I think at this point, knowing that they have no way to attack Mimikyu.
Yeah, I'd maybe even just do an Eri check first, just to
see exactly like what we have going on here. Well,
see what
we hit 2. They do have a Turo, so that's they can take one more prize card.
Yeah, and they don't have a way to set up a Duraludon with even a single energy at this point in deck, so we can definitely bench that Mimikyu, and then next turn, if they Turo take a knockout, we can just Penny the other Snorlax.
And that's if they decide to play the Turo. Well, I guess
in
we'll
which
see.
case, I think they just deck out as well. So
That's very true. I mean, they could play Iono to not deck out, and at this point, we realize like, I mean, Iono does give the okay. So we are just going to be able to win by deck out in a fair amount of time. They get to draw
they could have Iono'd and then Turo the following turn, but realistically, that's just never going to win them the game anyways. I think they probably just wanted to take one last prize before they wrapped it up here.
So, yeah, we're going to go with the gigantic double check our opponents at 0. We're going to end our turn, and they have no cards to draw, so we hit the alternate win condition. That was kind of a cool game. I mean, typically, like you said, it's a tough matchup, but we got there.
Yeah, I mean, players very commonly don't really know how to play against Snorlax. I think even like one of the best players I played against at Toronto was Christian Labella. I played against him day 2. He was on Regidrago and ended up making top 8 at the event. And even he, like, going into the game was like, yeah, I really haven't played, like, I haven't tested this matchup that much, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, it's not a fun one to test. It does take a lot of time to test, so people might just be like, yeah, we're gonna take the unknown into it and see how it goes and kind of use their skills. So no shame if you haven't played this against Snorlax, but you can see that, like, if I was playing the Dawn against the Snorlax, I would have played a little bit different. As a Snorlax player, understanding how the Snorlax X works, they definitely like caught themselves out of a lot of win conditions early on. Whereas I think if Cyrus and I were both playing the Arch or the Dawn on the other side, that we would have been able to maybe piece together a different game plan.
Yeah, especially since, like, you can see how, like, you know, they didn't use their first Turo effectively, they didn't use their first Pal Pad effectively, and they still got down to 1 prize. So, like, I imagine if either of us were on the Archuludon side there, we could have taken at least 1 more prize card to seal out that game.
Exactly, yeah. So sometimes it's just using all your resources, but I'm sure we could talk about that forever. We have some closing thoughts for this, so we'll jump into that.
All right, so some final things about the deck list before we wrap up. I want to talk specifically about the enriching energy. So that's like the sort of the star of the deck, the ace spec that people give me a lot of questions about. You can play so many different ace specs in Snorlax, but this enriching energy is, in my opinion, the most powerful consistency card in Snorlax right now. Being able to combo that with the Pidgeot V, like we saw during the game, to reuse it by shuffling it back in with Vanishing Wings, allows us to use enriching energy multiple times per game. If you think about how Rotom is used, usually gets knocked out or picked up with Penny or after the first couple of turns, so usually it's drawing you about 6 to 9 cards anyways, which means after 2 enriching energy uses, you've already drawn as many cards as you usually draw with Rotom over the course of a game. And then in longer games, you can often use enriching energy 5+ times, drawing 20+ cards over the course of the game. And it synergizes well with the Colress's Tenacity, being able to search out it, as well as the Artisan to search for a Snorlax. And we can use enriching energy in combination with Cyllene to immediately draw back into the cards that we Cylened on top.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely some use cases. I wasn't even thinking about the Cyllene enriching energy strategy, but I think that's why you're one of the best players in the game, one of the pioneers of modern Snorlax. So I think this is a deck that, like, as much as this video is supposed to be a complete comprehensive guide, there's still more to kind of be discovered about Snorlax when it comes down to it. It's been an interesting run of this deck and control archetype over the past few years, and I think we're kind of seeing the end of it. We're going to see rotation coming up soon. I know a lot of players are looking forward for Prismatic. Do you think that there's anything Prismatic wise that adds to Snorlax, or do you think Badu and Regigigas being added to the game has any effect on the metagame implications of Snorlax?
I think that as much as I have been loving the no Rotom build, I actually think that post Prismatic Evolutions, based on my early predictions, you might be able to go back to Rotom with less Regidrago prevalence. Even the Regidrago lists that I've seen for next format aren't really playing that alone in Exeggutor EX because they need to fit in more cards to deal with Badoo. So we might be able to see Snorlax go back to a more traditional list next format.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for me, I'm a little bit worried because the Regigigas is a pretty easy add into Lugia. Lugia's typically been a very difficult matchup to deal with Snorlax. So I think it's kind of only time will tell kind of situation, but Snorlax is always going to have a place in the metagame. If it's not a top 10 deck, then it might be a top 20 deck. But usually when people play Snorlax, they end up going pretty far anyways when it comes down to it. As always, appreciate having you on here. If you're trying to get in contact with Cyrus, I'm going to put her contact details when it comes to Metafy coaching, YouTube, social media, any of that stuff. So definitely hit her up for some coaching on Snorlax or pretty much any other deck. Cyrus plays a lot of different decks when it comes to tournaments.
We can maybe just put my my Linktree link in the description there, and you can find me on all socials and all of my other content through there. But especially check me out on YouTube at Cyrus Davis TCG. Check me out on Metafy, and if you want to see more Snorlax content, I have lots of videos on Snorlax on my channel as well. And we actually have an article on the TSS Metafy group that I made before Toronto Regionals, detailing this exact Snorlax list. That I posted only a few days before I brought it to Toronto.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a good call to action to check out the TSS Metafy group. I know Cyrus writes articles there. I write articles there. You can get articles from pretty much any member from Shuffle Squad. And a lot of us are posting our exact 60s that we're working on. And I played Ancient, made top 64. Cyrus made top 64 with Snorlax. These are all decks that we have access to and full written comprehensive guides to that can complement a video like this. So maybe video learning isn't your best. Reading the article and learning in different ways can be fantastic. So yeah, stay tuned for more great content coming up. I think this video is probably going out on Wednesday, so we still have access to a tier list video. We still have access to a top 10 best decks video. So just a lot of great content overall on the channel. And of course we have Prismatic Evolutions coming out later on this week. So we will be sure to cover that. As always, Cyrus, appreciate it. And maybe we'll collab with another video soon. So stay tuned for more.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries at all. We'll definitely have to catch up. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Have yourself a great one. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.